Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We are talking about a big economic crisis arising from China today and right now rocking the global markets, the banking system. Of course, we're talking about the Evergrande crisis, Evergrande, the big real estate company. And before I go more into it, I will share with you a Chinese expression. I will not tell you the meaning right now because if I do, that will take away the fun of the story because this is really the gist of the story. This tells you what's happening in China right now, the politics behind it, because behind everything that happens with economics, there is politics, always. Whether it's a democracy or not a democracy, doesn't matter. Dictators need politics or need to use politics even more than Democrats. So this expression is Boluan Fanzheng. My Chinese pronunciation is obviously not perfect. Boluan, B-O-L-U-A-N. Fanzheng is F-A-N-Z or Z. H-E-N-G. So Boluan Fanzheng. I will come back to it in a few minutes. We know what's happened with Evergrande, the big real estate company in China, melting down. And that has led to trouble in stock markets all over the world. The banking system is shaking. Many people are calling it China's Lehman moment. Remember the meltdown of Lehman Brothers? That had led to the global financial crisis of 2008. In India, the top banker Uday Kotak has already described it in a tweet. Please see the tweet. In a tweet saying that this is China's IL&FS moment. Now, IL&FS, as you know, was an Indian company, big financial company, which melted down, which looked like it disappeared. And then Government of India set up a group of people headed by Uday Kotak to try and recover as much of its lost debt as possible. That was infrastructure leasing and financial services. That's what the company was called. So he says this is like China's IL&FS moment. Whatever it is, it's a big crisis out of China. It is now hitting the whole world. Now, before I go into greater detail of what exactly has happened in China, how China's politics or Xi Jinping's politics is hurting China's economy, and that in turn is damaging global markets and economies. But before I go there, I will also remind you that we also have an economy. That is a media organization, a news media organization, which you like very much. I know you like the print. We also have an economy, and our economy is run by not one person, not 10 persons, not 100,000, 10,000 persons. It is run by hundreds of thousands of people like you. Find people like you who know that they must pay for good journalism. So please pay for good journalism. Take a paid subscription. I will today be quoting a lot of information, for example, from a Wall Street Journal article. Now, you might say, oh, fantastic, that paper has done a great article, and I'm quoting from that. But the fact is that some of you will then complain to me that you are sharing the link of an article from an organization which is under a paywall, so which is behind a paywall, so we can't read it. So that is what it is. They do great journalism because people pay for it. I can read from the Wall Street Journal because I pay for it. So you also pay for the print. Take a paid subscription. I'm appealing to your good sense and to your sense of self-respect. This is not an appeal for donations. Pay for the good stuff that you consume, and good, useful stuff, wholesome stuff is also good journalism. Anyway, let's get back to business. Now, Evergrande is a Chinese real estate company. What is a big real estate company, you might think? At the peak, that's about 2.5 years back, Evergrande's market cap was more than $50 billion. 50 billion US dollars. That is serious bit of money, right? It's a lot of money. Today, it is down to a little over $4 billion. I think today it's just a little bit better, around $4.8, $4.9 billion. So it has lost nearly 90% of its value. In fact, in the last 6 months, its share has lost 85% of its value. So a share which was about just over 15 Hong Kong dollars is today just over 2.7 Hong Kong dollars. So you see what's happened to that share and what's happened to the value of that company. Why should we bother? What goes of our pops? हमारे बाप का क्या जाता है in India? Why should we bother? Now, I'll tell you why. Because just yesterday, you might have seen that Indian stock markets fell by 1%. And the companies that took the hit were the big steel companies, for example. So if a company melts down in China, why do Indian steel companies take a hit? Because Indian steel companies are steel exporters. China is the biggest consumer of steel in the world. Construction industry is a big consumer of steel, cement, stuff like that, paints, stuff like that. So what happens when China's biggest real estate company rolls over? Then that has an impact on global steel markets. Prices will crash, demand will crash. That also has an impact for global cement markets, other construction markets, paint markets. This is that big a company. Do you want to know how big a company this is? This company has more than 1,300 projects in 280 cities of China. At this point, this company owns 2% of all newly constructed real estate in China. It does business mostly in residential apartments, residential housing. It is, when you see the market cap of $50 billion, at $50 billion, this was several multiples of the market cap of all listed real estate companies in India. It was that big. So this is really a behemoth in China. Sometimes it's the number one, sometimes another one is number one, but they are close. But at this point, I'd say this is the biggest real estate company in China from the peak from where it has now fallen. And it is now a pale shadow of itself. It's just 10% of itself. The company was set up by Hui Ka-yan in 1996. It was called Hengda Group. In India, you might say Hengda Group, but Hengda Group in Guangzhou. And from there, it grew and grew and grew, and now it has grown into such a big company. And as companies grow, they get a lot of money, and they also develop the ability to attract a lot of money by way of debts. Look at my balance sheet, look at my company, I am so brilliant, buy my shares, also invest money in me, or give me your money to invest. So this company also became a big wealth management company. So the ultra high net worth individuals began giving it the money to manage. So they also built a huge portfolio of that. Then it started making electric cars. Then it started also getting into food, drinks. Maybe if it was India, it would have also bought a couple of TV channels and started a media company as well. You see what's happening in India. Ambani's have one, Adani's might have one now. So when people get really successful in a business, they become conglomerates and they want to do everything. What happens in some of these cases is that a lot of the times, this success is organic. This comes from the money you earn and from your market valuation. But in some cases, it is also done through leverage, which means you have borrowed a lot of money. This company has borrowed a lot of money. Do you really want to know how much money has this company borrowed? This company has borrowed upwards of $300 billion. What is $300 billion? That is more than 2.2 trillion rupees. So this company has just borrowed humongous amounts of money. And now it looks like this company is defaulting on its debt because the company carries so much debt. It has to keep paying interest on it. How is the debt raised? The debt is raised by floating bonds. So there is one bond that is now coming up for interest payment this Thursday. That is 2 days from now. Another bond that is a 2024 bond that comes up for an interest payment again on September 29th. For the first one, the interest payment is about $84 million. Second time, it's about $48 million. So will the company be able to pay this interest or not? Because if they are not able to pay this interest, then they will be default. This interest has to be paid within 30 days. Otherwise, this will become a default on bonds. And once that happens, then the global crisis can be unleashed. First of all, there will be a crisis in Chinese markets. Chinese markets will begin to melt down, and then it will have an impact on global markets. Now, why did this happen? This was a vehicle that was going on a super highway in fifth gear or overdrive or whatever with no speed limits, right? How did it suddenly come to a halt? So what happened was that beginning last year at some point, middle of last year, maybe around time he thought that he had gotten rid of or he'd been able to fight off the first wave of COVID pandemic. Once the scare was over, Xi Jinping thought that this was the time for him to move in and control some of his capitalists who'd become too powerful. And one of the ways in which they had become too powerful was by raising money from the markets through IPOs, through private equity, etc. And that was mostly done by tech business. So he targeted them, and you know what he did to Alibaba, Tencent, etc. Now, lately Didi, the cab hailing app. But he also saw the other set of industry which had become so rich and so powerful because it had borrowed a lot of money. And he said, you guys have just borrowed too much. So suddenly at some point late last year, he imposed new rules. Remember, in the last 6 months or so, Xi Jinping's government has imposed more than 100 new rules, regulations, restrictions, farmans, encyclicals, etc., decrees, all to control Chinese businesses. So one of the most draconian ones was to place limits on how much a company could borrow, right? So very strict limits were put. It was a bit like running very hard on a treadmill and suddenly the power goes off and you don't have a power backup, or suddenly somebody switches off power. What happens? You then fall backwards because you're already moving very hard. You can't stop suddenly. So that is what happened to China's leveraged companies, China's companies that had borrowed a lot of money. That was mostly the real estate companies. And among those companies, this one, that is Evergrande, or Evergrande if you want to say so, Evergrande because it's spelled with an E in the end. Evergrande was the most buccaneering of all. They had taken the most amount of debt. They had taken debt, as I told you, not just to run their business, but they also had taken debt by way of wealth management from people who had invested with them. And once they started declining or collapsing, people began to ask for their money back. Now, a lot of their money would also come as pre-deposits from people who bought apartments which had not yet been constructed. Remember all these cases around Delhi, Amrapali and everything, and I'm sure every city in India has a case like that, or several cases like that, where builders took money ahead of constructions and then were not able to construct for 8 years, 10 years, and that's how RERA came in, our new Real Estate Regulation Act. So something like that happened. Lakhs of apartments were sold to people who paid advances trusting this company, although these apartments had not been built. Now, this company was under pressure to repay because everybody wanted the money back. So the company said, look, we don't have the money to pay you, but we'll pay you in apartments, right? So take it in kind. Now, who wants an apartment in place of cash? They said, no, but we'll give you apartments at a discount. Discount going up to 52%. Now, okay, some people might not have a choice. Marta kya na karta. You will take it, right? But at the same time, the company's balance sheet is now being driven hollow because this balance sheet was built around the idea that they will make a profit on those apartments. Now the apartments that were ready were being sold but being given away at up to 50% discount, while a lot of the apartments had not yet been built and those guys wanted their money back. So how would this company then handle it? That's how the company's bonds got derated, company's share got hammered down. And as that happened, you can imagine who are the people who had lent money to this company. They were Chinese banks. So this company has borrowed from 171 Chinese banks and 121 finance companies or financial institutions. Now, all of them have got stressed because their borrower has got stressed. So you know what happened to some big Indian banks when some big companies defaulted in India. Remember SR Group, for example, and later the banks recovered a lot of that money. But you've seen a lot of the big conglomerates and companies, when they collapse, a lot of the banks are taken down with them. So that is like, hum to doobenge sanam, tumko bhi le doobenge. So this is the case where 171 Chinese banks and 121 Chinese financial institutions right now are troubled because of this. Because if Evergrande goes down, then they will all be stressed as well because they are lenders. Their money will not come back. Now, I see an article in the BBC which I am sharing with you where they quote somebody from the Economist intelligence unit saying that this is bound to now unnerve foreign investors. So they'll pull out of Chinese markets. Also, it will make even tougher for credit markets to work in China. Who will help out? Will the Chinese government bail out? So there is a quote from Hu Xijin, our favorite, editor-in-chief of the Global Times, when he's not holding forth on India and America and strategic issues, he's holding forth on the economy, his master's voice. So he says you can rule out the idea or the notion that Chinese government is going to bail this company out. Chinese government will not bail this company out. So what is the way forward? There are three possibilities. One, a messy meltdown, which is in nobody's interest. Don't greet this with any sense of schadenfreude, because whatever happens in China will affect your markets and the value of your own investments in Indian mutual funds and Indian stock markets. Now, this is a globally connected system. You cannot laugh at someone else's peril like this, because this will visit you. You can't help it. So one is a messy meltdown, which is something nobody wants. Second is a managed collapse, which is that, okay, this is too big to fail, but we'll still let it fail. So just as, say, in India, Uday Kotak says this in his tweet, India let IL & FS fail, but set up a system so IL & FS has now already been able to collect 61% of its dues. So this is a managed collapse, a collapse, but not a boom like this, right? A managed collapse. Or third is a bailout by Beijing. Now, bailout by Beijing is right now not looking likely unless Chinese government buys out this company and converts it into a state-owned enterprise. Unlikely that they'll do it at this time, and from whatever I read in international press or specialist press, it does not look like that's going to happen. But at the same time, remember, in China, 1.5 million people or 1.5 million apartments have been sold to people who paid the money, but these apartments have not been delivered to them. So this will have quite a massive downstream effect. And the Chinese government and the Chinese central bank are working on it. So PBOC, which is the People's Bank of China, which is like the Reserve Bank, Chinese equivalent of the Reserve Bank of India, they've already pumped in a week about $14 billion just to keep the money supply going in the markets. The central banks have to do those things to keep stability. So that is the crisis which is shaking the world right now. You know, an earthquake of force 8 or 8.7 hit someplace and it unleashed a tsunami that hit God knows how many other countries. Something happened on one coast of Japan, reached our own eastern coasts in India and killed a lot of people. So global financial markets are interconnected like that. Now, why is this happening in China? And why is Xi Jinping acting the way? Is he nuts? Has he lost it? Does he want to puncture his own car? Does he want to finish the China story? So you can choose your own description. In fact, depending on what your politics is, you might even say he's all of this or he's some of this. But whatever he's doing is motivated by politics and by his own interest, because dictators, all politicians work in their interest. Very few politicians put public interest or larger interest of the humanity ahead of their own interest. So what is Xi Jinping's big interest right now? Next year, 2022, Xi Jinping is going to break an unwritten rule in China. The rule is that the president gives up his tenure once it's over and then someone else takes over. That is how transition has taken place in the past. Now, we talked about this in a Cut the Clutter earlier. He's got the changes and he's got the Central Party Congress also to authorize these changes, that he can continue as president almost forever, or in fact for as long as he pleases to. So 2022 will come that moment when a transition was to take place, when he was to hand over to somebody, but he has no intention of doing so. He has stated so. Now, to cover for that, what does he do? So what is the favorite chapter in every dictator's book? Whenever he has to do something drastic, he leans back, pulls out the book and opens that chapter. That chapter is titled Nationalism, Religion, Populism and Ideology. Now, in case of China, religion is not available. So nationalism, Chinese nationalism has been running high at its peak for some time now under Xi Jinping. Second, populism. He's been saying for a year that too many people have become rich too easily and the rich have a very ostentatious lifestyle. It's causing inequality. It's irritating those who are not so rich, etc., and you should control your lifestyles. There is an excess of wealth, etc. So that's populism. And then ideology. He calls it socialism, but it is communism, and it is communism with Maoist characteristics. So in fact, on 1st of July this year, when the Chinese Communist Party celebrated its centenary, he appeared at that event in a Mao suit. He wore a Mao suit and he delivered a very Maoist kind of lecture, and I will quote a line from it in a minute. And then you knew that he was setting up the stage for this transformation where he would use nationalism, populism and ideology. And there is a quote from him from 2013, which I pick up from this Wall Street Journal article by Ling Wei, who's our favorite reporter from China in world media and who we quote from very often. And there he said in 2013, while talking to his party people, that socialism with Chinese characteristics is socialism. It is no other ism. And that is what he's now living up to. And he's again saying that what was his capitalism? This was just a transition on the road to fuller or more complete socialism. That's where he's getting, and he's using it as a cover to make himself president for life if he so chooses, and not to hand over the baton to the next guy. So these are a dictator's excuses or a dictator's ruses. So if we read this Ling Wei article, which I am sharing with you, remember I'll share a link with you, and you might get a notification saying that you can only read it if you subscribe. So subscribe. This is very good stuff to read. Pay to read good stuff. Pay to read the print. So she says that this looks like the decades-long Western-style capitalism in China is now being rolled back, because Chinese Communist Party thinks that capitalism, wealth creation, private capital has now run amok and they have to be controlled. And why do they have to be controlled? They have to be controlled because they are now threatening the party's supremacy. So this is not, ideology is not about anything else. The ideology is about maintaining the party's supremacy over everything in China, including Chinese business. And then it says that this is Xi Jinping leaning back on the Maoist view. And the Maoist view was that capitalism is just a transitory phase on the road to fuller socialism, total socialism. Now, he wants his party to control, one, the flow of capital, second, set limits and parameters for entrepreneurs on how much they can invest, where they invest, what kind of profits they make, and how much of profits they can keep and how much of the profits they have to give away. In fact, Alibaba just now has vowed to give away $15.5 billion. I don't know if the Chinese have some equivalent of a compulsory CSR as we do in India, corporate social responsibility, but towards the state. So $15.5 billion, not a small amount of money. And third, he wants the party to keep control over all levers on the economy. And that's the reason I mentioned to you earlier, more than 100 farmans have been passed by his government in the past 6 to 8 months. And that has caused a lot of change. In fact, many of the Chinese entrepreneurs, including the founder of DD Global, for example, are thinking about either escaping or relocating to other countries. And some have actually also faced action from the government on the apprehension that they were planning to leave the country. So government has moved in to make sure that they can't do that. At a leadership meeting of the CCP in August, last year August, 2020 August, Xi Jinping has said that, look, our slogan is common prosperity. Our slogan is not that some people become very rich. On August 29, the party issued a statement which was very loaded, and the party said that Xi Jinping's statement indicates a move towards a profound revolution. When did you last see Chinese communists talking about revolution? Then he also figured, again, Wall Street Journal tells us, he also figured when Facebook and Twitter banned Trump, he took away the wrongest possible lesson from it. But you can call it the wrongest possible lesson because you live in a democracy. He took the perfect lesson for a dictator. The lesson was these corporations have become so powerful in America, they can even shut down the American president. So I cannot have a situation where somebody in China, a corporation, becomes that powerful. So for him, that was a cue to further accelerate his process of taking control of his own companies and his own capitalists. Now again, at this centenary celebration, he joined his party men to sing with them the International. The International, as we know from the early 19th century, that's like a song of revolution or the song of declaration of war by working classes on capitalism. So he sank the International with his people. It was played on Tiananmen Square, etc., etc. So this was really, he was bringing back the revolution. And he also sent out a message that in China, capitalism serves the people. I had mentioned earlier that I will tell you his central message at the party centenary celebrations. So the central message was, in China, capital serves the people. And after that, all this fight with ByteDance, Weibo, everybody started. Now all of them have sold substantial amount of their shareholding to state-owned companies. He also put restraints on his vice premier, that is Liu He. Vice Premier Liu He was like his chief economic advisor, and he was going around the world selling the China story and also doing a lot of messaging on behalf of Xi Jinping. He's now been put in shade. Not just that, he actually was made to do a bit of self-criticism in public. That's a very Mao style thing. It was something that Mao borrowed from Stalin. That means if a party official had done something that you didn't like, you told that party official to apologize in public, do self-criticism, say, I made this mistake, sorry, prayashit, maaf karo, right? I'll never do it again. So he got his vice premier to do a prayashit or self-criticism over allowing Didi, that is a Chinese company, to launch a $4.4 billion IPO at New York Stock Exchange, because they said that there are issues about security, because these apps like these collect a lot of data on Chinese people, what's happening in China, and we have to control it. So he did that self-criticism, and he also said that we have to fight the imbalance by big capital, and also we have to understand that there is a relationship between development and security. So this is what Liu He had to say in his self-criticism. Alongside, in the party journal in 2018, the party journal called Qiushi or Qiushi, 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 Xi Jinping wrote an article. Qiushi means literally seeking truth. This is the party's main theoretical journal, CCP's main theoretical journal. So Xi Jinping writes that China's practice shows that once socialist transformation is completed, the basic socialist system with public ownership as the main body is established. And then goes on to say, and state capitalism is a transitional economic form that will complete this process. So basically he's saying that what I'm moving towards now is state capitalism, and that will ultimately lead to total socialism. So he had indicated this even in his article earlier. And once again, we use many stereotypes and many metaphors and many cliches when we talk about China. Read the tea leaves, for example. But if you were only reading Xi Jinping's writings and speeches, you would have known where he was headed, and that's very clear now. So in China, this is now called Boluan Fanzheng. Remember, I had mentioned this in the very beginning, and I had said I will not tell you the meaning right now. I will tell you the meaning later, so I don't give away the surprise. Boluan Fanzheng literally means getting order, creating order out of chaos. And that is exactly what he's doing right now. So once again, as you see all this commotion in global markets, all these upheavals and all these tremors, and these are happening because of Evergrande. Behind this, as we said, there is politics. Then we have to understand that behind this is Xi Jinping's idea of disrupting the Chinese capitalist system, creating chaos, and through those chaos, seeking an order, a new socialist order that he wants as a kind of permanent ruler of China. So that trying to seek order out of chaos is Boluan Fanzheng.